Hello, hello, hello. My name is Anthony Gentry, and welcome to That's a Wrap, the unofficial movie review podcast for Northern Kentucky University. I will be your co-host for tonight, and joining me is my other lovely co-host, Austin Jameson.
I am Austin. In today's episode, basically what we're doing is, or just for the idea of what we're all about here, unlike a normal movie review podcast, we have one person who we both watch the movie together. One does detailed research, digs into the movie, sees what might have went over our heads, and then one person, me in this situation, completely goes in blind to this podcast. We've watched the movie, and I have completely just my own opinion.
Yes, and I have done extensive research. But first, Austin.
Yes.
What have you watched recently?
Oh my goodness. Well, what have I...
I know one thing we both watched.
Yeah, what was that?
The new Lightyear trailer.
Oh my goodness. That is true.
Yes. So this just came out this morning. It's a solo movie about Buzz Lightyear from the Toy Story franchise, starring Chris Evans instead of Tim Allen. What did you think of it?
Honestly, I would say it's something like when I first saw it, before watching the trailer, I was skeptical because honestly, it doesn't seem like something that would work. Or at least a standalone Buzz Lightyear. I obviously didn't know what it was about at first, but after watching it, it has really good potential. I saw somebody compare it to the visual style of WALL-E.
Oh, I can see that, yeah.
And I am all for that.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Evans, obviously, what a guy. Can't complain.
Love him.
I don't know how weird it's going to be without Tim Allen.
Yeah, that will be a little bit of the uncanny valley.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously in the trailer we didn't really hear him talk that much.
Right.
But he does say, I think, to infinity and...
Yeah, and
like, he does...
And what?
Yeah. I wonder what he's going to say next.
What is he going to say?
And, like, he does kind of have that raspiness.
Yeah.
Like
I think it'll be good for... And also, in the context of Lightyear's existence, I guess it's supposed to exist in the Toy Story universe. So it's really the Toy Story cinematic universe.
Yeah, I feel like this is kind of like what kids watched
in
the Toy Story universe that got them to want the Buzz toy.
Mm-hmm. And so, honestly, it makes sense for not the same voice actor to be Buzz Lightyear. So that they get away with. I
really liked this trailer. I mean, I love Pixar. I love all their movies, even Cars 2. Don't fight me.
Cars 2 is good.
It is good. And I don't know, I thought the visuals were amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I think the idea of just doing, like, this kind of Star Wars-esque space movie, it's really something Pixar hasn't done before. Like WALL-E, they have done that, but that's more just space, and this is kind of like a space epic in a way.
Yeah, it's definitely pushing the visual effects of Pixar, which I was gonna say they've always been phenomenal, but judging by the first Toy Story, where every kid is Sid or Andy, there's definitely like.
And even at the time, that was revolutionary.
Yes, exactly. And so now we have like photorealistic shots completely made of just CGI, and it is absolutely phenomenal. So
yeah, and like even I still feel like the characters look like toys, and I love that.
Yeah,
I love how they still kind of look like toys, but kind of look like actual people.
Yeah,
I think it really fits.
Buzz Lightyear with hair feels.
I know. Yeah, that was a little off.
Something. I'm looking to the live action creation where it is just Chris Evans with a giant chin.
I did not see that. No.
Fair enough. But yeah.
Wow. Anything else?
I don't think so. Not for Lightyear. As for other media, it's really just been the movie we're going to talk about today has been on my mind. I've been looking forward to talking about it. And mostly I think I've been busy with other things on campus, but trying to keep it on as fresh on my mind as I can so we can start talking about it.
Yeah, so Dune is this new sci-fi epic from director Denis Villeneuve.
Ooh.
It is released by Warner Brothers and let me get this name, Legendary Entertainment. And I want to start this off by saying this is a long movie.
It is a long movie.
Yes. And I was surprised not by the length, but by the pacing, because it is slowly paced.
Yeah.
But another one of Denis Villeneuve's movies, Blade Runner 2049, is longer. This is 2.5 hours. That was about 2 hours and 50 minutes.
I didn't know Blade Runner that one was that long.
Yeah. Yeah, and Blade Runner, for me, it flew by.
Mm-hmm.
But this, you can really feel the length.
So, what did you think?
I like the movie.
Okay.
I do have, I have some qualms with it. But I thought overall it was a very good movie.
Mm-hmm.
Some people who we watched it with, they said it reminded them of kind of Star Wars, but done better, especially compared to the more recent ones.
Okay.
And I would agree with that. It does feel like, actually, the director has said that for him, this is Star Wars for adults. And I can see that a lot. There's a lot of talking and setup in this movie, kind of like Star Wars does. There is action, but it's kind of minimal. It's used to just enhance the plot.
I agree. It definitely feels like if Star Wars was a book first.
Yes.
Where it's, I'd say my biggest take with Dune, and I will say I very much liked it. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, yeah.
I didn't have a problem with the length. Watching it, I don't have a problem with the length. Working at a movie theater, getting out at 1 a.m., I do.
Yes.
But I feel like the best part for me was the world building.
Yes.
And that is what I would compare it to a certain level of George Lucas, Star Wars, where it's not, it doesn't, there are a few exceptions to this, but it's never just here's like some character talking and telling the story of the world.
Yeah.
It throws you immediately in. And like you said with the pacing, it never stops really to take a break. There's always somewhere that the characters are going or something you need to be thinking of. And it develops in a very fresh way where it is long and it does feel like I'm watching a book, but the book is like really interesting and told in a way that it's confusing, but now you want to know more.
Yes, the confusing aspects are kind of for the better of it.
Yeah.
And just to make this clear before we talk any further for the listener, this is a spoiler-free review, so you don't have to worry about any of that. We're not going to spoil any big plot points or anything like that. Just putting that out there.
Yes.
But yes, I do agree. The world building was very just natural. They kind of employ like the show don't tell policy of just
exactly.
Yeah, instead of just telling you everything, this is the world. These are the characters. Live in this right now.
Right. There's no direct exposition, besides the exceptions I was talking about, were the few situations where you see Paul,
who is the main character.
Yes. This isn't, I wouldn't call it a spoiler. It's just something that happens near the beginning of the movie. But he has little hollow projector tapes that shoot up information onto a wall that it's like almost like a lecture kind of thing, which is the direct exposition, but those are cut short and then expanded on by those events occurring.
Yeah, and it's kind of needed for the story because this is a big story.
Yes.
Basically, it is set in the far future. Humans have evolved beyond Earth, and there's this planet called Arrakis that has this very rare mineral called spice. And this is probably the most wanted and needed mineral that everyone wants. If you have it, you're basically rich, and you can only find it on Arrakis. And there's also these two warring houses, and this enemy house, which is the Harkonnens, I believe.
I heard Harkin, but I watched that movie without subtitles.
Yeah, so the Harkin house and House Atreides, and the Harkin house are kind of the enemy houses, and they have always had control. But at the beginning of this story, the Emperor, who kind of rules over everyone, gives control over to House Atreides, which is our main character, which are the protagonists. And they kind of explain that though the spice is very much wanted in society, it is very hard to get because of just the planet. There's sandworms, there's also natives that you have to kind of get across and make deals with.
Right.
And so it sounds simple, but there's a lot in this.
Yeah. It's definitely or what were you going to say?
Oh, no, you can continue.
It's a world that they set it up at the beginning in a way where it's on that point of contention, and they do a very good job of intriguing the audience and pulling them in. And I would say, in a more meta sense, the music, and my biggest concern with the movie is that it was going to be very bland because it is a movie about a desert planet.
Yes.
And they did a really, really good job, I'd say, with the visuals. I wish I had access, or that my theater had some sort of IMAX or something really special, which would be nice. Or you go.
Yeah, I was just going to say, seeing this on the big screen,
yeah,
is kind of essential for this movie.
Yes.
I've seen people say, like, oh, see every movie on the biggest screen you can.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought, like, maybe, yeah, but this one, you really do.
Right.
Because I don't want to go too specific, but there's one scene involving one of the sandworms towards maybe about the middle of the movie. You don't even see it, but you can see the kind of damage it does, and it is honestly jaw-dropping to see the scale of that compared to the humans.
One of the biggest threats to the movie industry right now, or the movie theater industry, I should say, is HBO Max and streaming services.
And this was also released to HBO Max.
Yes. And my parents watched it on HBO Max, and they liked it, but they weren't generally impressed with what could have been that sort of cinematic grandness that you get with watching in a movie theater.
And this movie almost wasn't on HBO Max, actually. Last year, when Warner Brothers announced that all of their movies were going to HBO Max, Legendary almost pursued legal action against them, saying that they produced about 75% of the movie, and Warner Brothers financed the other 25%, and that they have control over this, and they did not allow Warner Brothers to do this, and it almost went to court. Obviously, it didn't happen. It's on HBO Max.
Right.
But I think that is kind of interesting to see how everyone does not want this to be on HBO Max, and yet it is now.
Right. I'm curious. I feel like that's a conversation that you can really dig into at another time for the streaming service discussion, because at a certain point you get obviously with COVID and the global pandemic, it was a matter of coming out of that slowly, trying to figure out what are people willing to do? Yes. Are they comfortable going to movie theaters anymore? And over time, our numbers have been going up for sure. Obviously, working for context, I keep referencing, I work at a movie theater, and so I get a pretty good firsthand of the statistics of people coming in and out and seeing the movies that do well. Back our probably first big movie that forced us to take the line seriously again was Shang-Chi, whenever that came out. That did pretty decent. It was about 700 a day for Friday and Saturday, and then it slowly died down from there. Venom came out a couple weeks later, and that did even better, which personally was surprising, but this isn't a review about Venom. And then Dune everything's been slowly moving up. So it looks like we're getting more comfortable with people preferring to go to the movie theaters again and seeing that. Because while there is a certain appeal for, say they make a new Toy Story, like Buzz Lightyear, or I believe it's just Lightyear.
Yes.
It makes sense for a family with 2 or 3 kids to pay $30 on Disney Plus to get the premiere access, and then stream it at home where they already have snacks and everything is under control and they can watch it in the comfort of their living room. But with Dune, you definitely have that large aspect of just everything needs to be amped up.
Exactly. Even the sound of everything,
yes.
Just the picture quality, you kind of can't beat that from a movie theater, especially an IMAX theater.
Yeah. And
to go into some of the box office of what it did, this past weekend, it made $41 million domestically. And on, say, non-COVID standards, that would be a bit of a disappointment.
Yeah.
But I feel like this is a big win for the movie, especially since it kind of generates towards the more older audience, I would say. And it is something that's very unknown for a lot of people. Yeah. It has also made about $180-ish million internationally for a total of $223 million worldwide.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do you happen to have the what it was projected to make?
I don't know the projections. I believe they were lower, maybe around 20 to 30 million, and they just kept going up as it went from like Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Gotcha.
Yes, and because of that, I don't know if you want to talk about that right now, but they just announced a sequel to Dune called
Gotcha.
Dune Part 2, coming out in October 2023.
Yeah, I feel like with Dune, to a certain extent, I feel like, I don't know if it was purposeful. I feel like it was, or I feel like personally it was, that they kind of didn't make it known. They didn't advertise that it was a part one. Everywhere except the opening title shot of the movie, it says just Dune. And then when you start the movie, the first thing you see is Dune Part 1.
Yes, yeah. And this is a very incomplete movie. The way it ends, we won't say anything, but it just... That's kind of one of my biggest problems with it. It kind of does just end because there has to be a second part.
Yeah, definitely. It feels like you're literally just, you get halfway through a book and you just shut it.
Yeah.
And now you have to wait. Is there a date for when they're expecting to have the next one finished by?
Not like a specific date, but October 2023.
Gotcha. So imagine stopping in the middle of a book and then trying to pick it up 4 years later.
Yeah, exactly. I do wish they filmed this back-to-back so we could have this next year. But I understand because they didn't, because it was such a big risk.
Right.
For putting about like this. The budget was $165 million for clarity. And with marketing, we could be looking at anywhere from $200 to $250 million.
Right.
And so to make two movies out of that could be about $500 million, $500 million.
Yeah.
That would be a big risk. So I understand why they did it. I just wish they did.
Right. Either way, I do look forward to the second part, but now I'm met with the dilemma of if I want to read the book or not.
Yes, it is a very long book.
Yes. I've heard, currently right now, my girlfriend is reading the book. And she saw it with us, and she was about like to the point that it ends at in the book. She said it was a pretty good representation. There was some things that were lacking that I won't necessarily get into, but she said her favorite part of seeing the movie was getting to put names to faces and just visualize what everything really looked like. And especially with this like version of Dune, or with the movie specifically, you get the like AAA big budget blockbuster version of what is supposed to be this massive like sci-fi fantasy world.
Yeah. And it is a massive world.
Yes.
Like, the visual style is very distinct, where you can tell you're on Arrakis,
right.
You're on a House Atreides' home planet. Like, you can tell where it is because the visual style is so unique for every place.
Yeah.
Anyway, as you were saying.
And just, it's really just a debate of if you're willing to, one, separate from what you understand with the movie, because I've not read the book, obviously, and so I have this perception of the story and what I understand from it. And so now if I choose to go back and read the book, I now have a almost like multi-leveled like understanding of what's the book, what's the movie, and then there's like the Venn diagram in the middle of what actually happens and how to kind of process it. So I'm turned away from the idea. I think the best course of action, for me at least, would probably be wait until it comes out in what would be 2 years now.
Which actually isn't that long for a sequel, especially one that has just been announced.
Right. So probably I'll just rewatch the movie whenever we get to that point. I've also heard that the book in and of itself is very confusing and very wordy.
Yeah.
And so that is an undertaking I don't think I'm willing to do right now.
Yeah.
I will eat my popcorn and consume my media with my eyes.
I will say some of the movie is very confusing.
Yes.
But I feel like that kind of just goes to certain scenes, maybe some elements. Because most of the time, I had an idea of what was going on. Yeah. And afterwards, when I looked it up and like researched, my idea was right. So I think it does do a good job of like telling you what's going on and making it clear enough so you know, but also keeping it mysterious.
Yeah.
And a little ambiguous too.
It would definitely benefit to watch the movie once without subtitles and then once again with. That's what I really want to do. Because when you get into these sci-fi worlds, you start hearing words and they
don't mean
they
anything.
go in one ear and right out the other.
Yeah.
And I feel like I would get a lot more from the story if I knew what they were saying half the time. But in the nature of film, that's how it goes. So
yeah,
that is a venture for another time. Perhaps I'll do that in 2 years when the next part comes out.
We'll do that.
Please. Please, Anthony. Oh my goodness.
Hey, it's a good pun. Moving on,
Maybe.
I would like to talk about the characters.
Okay.
There's a lot of characters in this movie. I don't think we're going to go into all of them because there's just too many. One thing I would like to point out is the director, Denis Villeneuve, once again, wanted very strong female characters and felt that it was the most important part of this adaptation of adapting it from book to screen. How did you feel about that? Did you feel that like there were very strong female characters? Do you think it was successful at all?
I'd say it was pretty good. I know the doctor. I don't remember her name. It was the Arrakis, the Fremen doctor, I believe.
Yes. She was originally a male in the book.
Right. That's something that Josie was telling me about, or my girlfriend. And so in that context, I didn't notice any different. If she'd never told me, then I would never have known. It felt right, and it felt like it fitted the role.
It felt very natural.
Yeah.
I also really liked the sisterhood that you see.
Yeah.
Don't want to go too much into it, but I felt that their presence is very known.
Yes.
And is very powerful. Especially Helen Mirren's character. Not sure who the name was. But she was the person who gave Paul the pain box.
Okay.
In the movie.
Gotcha.
I liked her character very much because, like we said, like her mystique, but also you can tell she is like very powerful and much more powerful than maybe the movie lets you know, or especially that characters know. Yeah,
that was one of that whole arc that is really incomplete still. I feel like it was one of the hardest to follow.
That was
because it's really dropped on you without much explanation.
And there was actually a prequel series about that sisterhood coming to HBO Max next year.
Interesting. In the same universe as our cinematic Dune?
Yes. It's I'm not sure if Denis Villeneuve is directing it. I know he is at least producing it.
Okay.
But yes, it's called The Sisterhood.
Interesting.
All we know, it's a prequel series, and it will be about the sisterhood going into that. So I guess we will have Dune like every year, like this year, next year, and then Dune Part 2.
That is nice to know. I did not know they were doing that. Along with that, I'd say the mother. I'm not sure the actress who played her was, but
Rebecca Ferguson.
Gotcha. She did a very good job as well.
Yes,
I can't talk about the scene because it happens later in the film, but there is one very good performance that stuck with me. We might have to reconsider how we do spoilers. That would be a good conversation. But either way, we won't talk about anything here, and if anything, we'll work about that in the future.
Yes, and if anything, if we do have spoilers, we'll make sure to do that at the end of the review, just in case no one wants it, and then they can leave and go on their day.
Right. Did you have any notes about or any?
I really liked Oscar Isaac's character who played the dad.
Yes.
I believe his name was Leto.
That sounds right.
I thought he was a very strong character. If anything, I wish I had more of him.
Yeah.
Because I like how he's basically the leader of House Atreides, and you'd think that he would be. He's also the father of Paul. You'd think that he would be this like cold and demanding father who wants Arrakis for greed. But in actuality, he's not. He's the opposite. He like cares very much about Paul. He cares about his people. At one point, he says like, "Who cares about the spice? I want like my people are most important to me."
Right.
And I thought that was very refreshing, especially in a movie where they're mostly portrayed as villain characters.
Yeah, with like words like emperor and like baron flying around, it's hard to not picture in your mind a just some space dictator again, where it's like, here's a super hard environment and community, and they're all super mean, and the leader is this evil guy, and he treats his son poorly. And I agree, refreshing is definitely the word, to have a sci-fi film where the conflict doesn't come between the family itself, but it's a family united for the most part against another party completely.
Yes. How did you feel about the Baron, who is the leader of the enemy house?
How did I feel? Okay. I don't. I'm trying to figure out how to represent this without spoiling it. I'm gonna do it with a hand motion so nobody can see it. Do you know the part?
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Is there a good way of? Would you consider that?
I would say it's in the trailer.
It is,
so it's not a spoiler.
Okay.
He has this flotation device, and I hear that it is also accurate to the book. I've also not read the book, but that he was cursed to be very obese after he had sexually assaulted a woman.
Gotcha.
And I'm not sure if this is canon because I kind of read this somewhere else. And so he's cursed with like obesity, and that kind of represents his greed, where he just wants is everything. He wants more food, more power, more wealth.
Yeah.
And so he needs this flotation device to get around.
Gotcha. I'd say with him, it's he leans more towards the side of cliche, like villain, where it's this gluttonous. He's not the emperor. And I don't think I'm not sure about that.
We don't see the Emperor in this.
Okay. But for the Baron that we're talking about, it's just like you get this big gluttonous guy, and he's spouting like nonsensical orders, and I feel like for now he lacks depth in a certain degree.
Yeah, he's almost, I don't want to say cartoony, but just, like you said, that very cliched, stereotypical villain.
Yeah.
And the scene that we are talking about, that is in the trailer, where he just floats, it's kind of to, I feel like, convey his power against this other character, but I don't know if that works, because it just shows him floating up with, like, threatening music.
He's definitely...
But if anything, it was kind of comedic.
Yeah, it's less, they were trying to be, intimidating, but you just get this floating blob of, like, hearkened towards, like, and I don't know. It was an interesting take. I'm curious if it was different in the book or whatnot.
Yeah, I would like to see how that character is portrayed in the book. How did you feel about Zendaya? And her 3 minutes of screen time.
Yeah, It was a for what she was able to do. It was a good performance. I guess
I get all she does is really stare at the camera.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I need to start watching the trailers before we get in here to know what I can talk about and not.
Yeah. I feel like we can't really say much because her role is so small that it could verge on the side of spoilers.
Basically, if you watch the trailer, you've gotten your Zendaya.
You got all the Zendaya you need.
Yeah.
Because what you see is what you get. She is this kind of mysterious female figure who haunts Paul's visions. Who like he has these like visions, and she is very mysterious. He doesn't know who she is, if she is even real.
Yeah.
And he kind of tries to figure that out.
And
that's kind of all that happens with her character. There's a little bit but that's it.
Yeah, there's not very much depth as of this like moment. So, as I was saying, my girlfriend's reading the book, and she told me that Zendaya's character doesn't show up till like page 360.
Yeah, I hear she's in the second half of the book.
Yes, and so whenever we went and saw it, we were like, there's no way that they're going to have Zendaya in this and then throw her in for the last, like, 5 minutes.
That's exactly what they do.
That's exactly what they do. Some parts that aren't in the book are in those visions. They never specify that it's Zendaya's character in the book.
Yeah.
Or I don't know if she shows up at all. That's just me repeating what I was told about it. But it's all just like an interesting. I look forward to the second movie. I hope we get to see more development of that character.
Yes, I do think the second movie will delve a lot deeper into these characters and their ambitions and just who they are overall.
I feel like there's going to be a lot of... Well, I don't feel like there's going to be a lot of closure. I feel like this is the type of movie where, or at least with the second part, whenever that happens, it's going to be a very, very confusing as well. I feel like it's going to end on a more confusing note than we began the first movie with.
I can see that. I do think it will be a definitive end because the director has come out and said that, like, this is a two-part story. This is a two-part story.
Right.
And this is also a very big passion project for him.
Mm-hmm.
He said that he's been wanting to make a Dune movie since he was 14 years old.
Yeah.
Saying that, like, his past sci-fi works, which were Arrival and Blade Runner 2049, were just a setup for him to get experience, which I kind of find ridiculous, but in a good way, because those movies are ridiculously big and just so much sci-fi, and for that to just for him be getting experience,
right,
kind of says a lot about how he feels about Dune.
I've not seen Blade Runner 2049, but from like what I am familiar with trailers and just the things I see online, it definitely feels like you get this big flashy like cyberpunk world. Would you say that's roughly true for Blade Runner? Yeah. And then with Dune, like I said earlier, it's a desert. So you get more focused like ideas of their technology. And so there's still this like not I wouldn't call it cyberpunk, but it's still a very modernized futuristic technology built world that you get more realistic framework of, where it feels more of like an actual attainable future for like just like real life than something like Star Wars with Jedi and like just things that are fantasy. This feels more like a sci-fi, like I don't know, it's still a work of fiction, but based in reality. Like everything still has rules. I like the still suits. And just like the different like fun facts and like things that work into how our world works, but are slightly modified by that sci-fi side of the world.
I love the hints of Earth and how these are people from our world, but have just advanced beyond that. One of the things I would like to mention is a character who goes by Duncan Idaho.
Yes. Who
has been made fun of a lot. But Denis Villeneuve has come out and said that he loves the name because of, like we said, because it gives hints to Earth of a world before.
Yeah.
Before we wrap things up, we talked about a lot of positives. Is there any negatives that you have?
The length is one, but at the same time, without getting super into it, I feel like this movie wouldn't have been the same if it was shorter.
I feel like
it's one of those long spectacles that it drags out slowly, but that adds to... It's like a certain level of exhaustion that you put on along with the characters.
This is an epic. And you need to feel like you're in the world, and the length very much helps.
Yes.
It's also a lot of setup for what's to come, which is very needed, which is, like we said, the show don't tell.
Right.
Because they are showing and not telling. That adds on to the length. But I think it's very needed.
I'd say it's comparable to, at least my feeling when watching 1917, where I don't think 1917 is particularly a long movie, but obviously it's the one shot, and so the entire time you're following this character and things just keep happening and building and like blows keep getting struck.
Yeah, the tension just keeps on building and building as the shot just continues.
And so you're always left wondering, like, what's next?
And that's how you kind of feel with this movie, too.
Yeah. The time is painful, but necessary in a very good way.
Completely agree.
As for other bad things, I feel like some of my other... like negatives would pertain more to the plot and that we can't really talk about. But again, that's more focused on the book, not really the movie.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do feel, because I do have some qualms with the plot too. I do feel like it could be written better because there's so many movies that stray so far from the book.
Right.
I feel like what I've heard, this is a very faithful adaptation, but faithful does not mean that you have to make it like word for word. You can't change things just for more clarity or just make it have like more sense, things like that.
And like when you were talking earlier about the sisterhood in the book, there's a much larger focus on that in the beginning that would have been in the movie but was removed, I suppose, in favor of that TV show for HBO.
I believe so, yeah. I do. Once again, I love the sisterhood, the idea of them and how powerful they are.
Definitely.
And not going too much into it, like how Paul is connected to them. And I love everything about them.
It's all a very interesting setup that I look forward to them answering in the second one.
Yeah, I think my main problem is basically the ending. Just how it just ends.
Just
like you have
plopping the book down.
Yeah, you have this kind of big character moment that's very important to this specific character.
Yeah.
And then it just ends.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't really, it kind of does soak in the moment a bit, but then it quickly moves on and kind of says, "Hey, get ready for part 2." When I feel like it could have had a more definite ending and still be satisfactory.
Definitely. I agree to a certain extent. I feel like me personally, I like movies that they don't end on, because I wouldn't call the ending of Dune a cliffhanger. It is in the definition of the term, but it's not this kind of like action-filled, like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen next? I can't wait. It's like, oh my goodness. And then you just kind of like sit back in your seat and you're like, I have to wait 2 years for this?
Yeah. And there isn't much action in the movie either. I thought there would be a lot of action based on the trailers. But there's a good amount, but it's a lot of just talking and just like mediating on things.
Yeah.
And they're obviously set pieces. It's a big movie.
Yeah.
Big budget, actually not a lot of CGI. A lot of it was practically done. Like a lot of the ships that you see that they fly around in were built for real.
Cool.
And the actors actually like were in them. Obviously not flying in them.
Yes.
But yeah, so there is action, but it's not as much as I thought there would be. The director has said the sequel will have a lot more action and a lot less talking.
Okay.
Which I feel like as long as it's balanced, it's good.
I feel like that'll make sense because especially with this first movie where nobody's going in. Okay, maybe like, well, Dune I feel like is pretty big. It's enough people, a small handful of people who go and have read the book, but the majority of the people I say seeing Dune right now are just the general public who've not read it, and so getting that input and exploration. So obviously with any first movie, you're gonna get that exposition and learning, and here's how the world works. Obviously with the first part of Dune, it's more like, here is the world, learn how it works, unless I'm going to tell you this. But I feel like the second one, now that we have those rules settled and applied, it'll definitely dig into just moving forward and then seeing more development rather than establishment.
Yeah, exactly. So with that, do you have any more thoughts?
I don't think so. I personally like the fight scenes, I'll say.
Oh, yeah, no, the fight scenes,
what we do get are
excellent.
Yeah. I liked all honestly, I can't think of any of the actors or actresses that I particularly disliked. Josh Brolin's performance was really good.
I really liked his character. There was I feel like every scene he is in, he just nails it. Yeah. And he kind of just steals the show, especially like towards the beginning,
right,
when he's training with Paul, doing a kind of like fight scene of like, you need to be ready to go to this planet because you probably will be in a fight. Right. And just his entire character, I feel like it is very good, very well written, along with a lot of other characters.
And I really hope to see like more characters, more development, and all that in the second one. I hope it's the same level of writing and performance that when it comes to it.
I hope so too. So if you were to give this a rating out of 10, what would you give this?
Out of 10, I would give it, I'd say like an 8.4.
8.4. That's very specific.
I feel like Jinx. I'd say personally I like scoring movies out of 100.
Yeah.
Because you get it. Well, 100 is basically just out of 10, but you add decimals.
Yes. So you'd give it an 84 out of 100.
Yes,
Okay.
I would.
I'd say if I gave it out of 100,
Mm-hmm.
I would say we were very similar. I would maybe, if it was out of 10, I'd say maybe an 8. But to go more specific, yeah, I would say maybe like 83, 84, maybe even 85.
Yeah.
I thought it was just really well done. I do have problems with it, but the problems with it weren't so bad that it broke my immersion or made me absolutely hate it.
Right.
It just had some minor inconveniences that could use some tweaks, obviously. But I feel like the sequel will learn from that, be bigger, be better.
Exactly.
And just be an overall very solid 2-movie franchise.
I absolutely agree.
All right. And with that, thank you for listening, everyone.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
We recommend you see the movie in theaters if you can.
Yes, and join us in 2 weeks when
Yes.
we review The Eternals.
Yes, we will be here Wednesday at 4. I believe the date. I don't know it off the top of my head. You have a calendar.
Yes, the date will be November 10th.
Yes, November 10th at 4 p.m.
Yes,
and
Austin will be our researcher.
yes, I'm looking forward to that.
I'm very much looking forward to this movie. I think, from the few things I've heard, it is going to be a very different and a very good Marvel movie.
Yes, I certainly hope so. But that is it for today.
Yes, and with that, that's a wrap.
That is a wrap.